Hello, you're listening to Queer Everything, a queer of color podcast about thriving in the world while being at odds with it. I'm Lena Rafiq Sheikh. It is impossible to release this episode and not talk about what is happening in the US right now in late June of 2022. We are witnessing what I can only call a desperate slide towards fascism. For people who have felt targeted for years, and for people who are maybe newly becoming aware of how tenuous our rights and freedoms are, this moment is incredibly fraught. I wasn't clear about the explicit link between the backlash against LGBT and specifically trans rights and reproductive freedom until I listened to the Anti-Trans Hate Machine, which is a 4-part podcast miniseries from Translash Media. Journalist Amara Jones looks at the coordinated network of money and influence that has been behind the anti-trans, anti-LGBT, and anti-bodily autonomy statutes that have been advancing in so many U.S. states, and links this explicitly to an incomprehensible vision that is looking increasingly possible. A United States where Christian right values are politically imposed by a minority on people who do not want this, but rather want, very simply, the freedom to choose how to live. Seriously, listen to the podcast, specifically part 4, to learn about what the hell dominionism and kingdom impact are. It's really chilling. This is excellent reporting, and I highly, highly recommend it to anyone who wants to understand what the fuck is happening right now. I've put the link in the show notes. In the last few weeks, there have also been highly visible attacks or attempted attacks on the LGBT community during Pride Month, to say nothing about the bills and other political attacks that have been having an increasingly oppressive impact in the US and other parts of the world. I feel these things when they happen deeply and personally, as do many queer people, especially queer people of color. And I want to say here that I'm not just doing this podcast for me or for people like me. I'm also doing it for our allies and the people around us, and for people who maybe don't understand us, who perhaps think of us as separate, but whose fates are inextricably bound to ours in ways that are becoming increasingly apparent. Our enemies are the same. They are the enemies of liberation, of bodily autonomy, and of freedom in the truest sense, the freedom to be able to show up in the world as who we really are and make our own choices about how we live our lives. And I firmly believe that the only thing that will help us now is learning to come together and fight as a unified group. I digress, but only a little. Back to the topic at hand. We had our best first week download numbers out of our last episode with Ali and Muhammad, which really warmed my heart. In the previous episode, we ended with how Muhammad told his mother that he is gay. In today's, we start with how Ali told his, with a content note that this story involves his being taken to a religiously oriented psychiatrist. We go on to talk about disclosing to other people close to us, about faith, and the importance of allyship, which, again, feels increasingly salient in this present moment. Welcome.
It's so funny because, I have so many people that tell me, because I tell them the same thing about my mom, and everyone tells me the same thing. They're like, your mom knew. Come on. How could she not know? Like, you're a walking, like, unicorn, How could your mom not know that you're gay? And it's so funny because that's exactly what my mom said when I kind of did the same as you, Muhammad, where I laid the seeds, but in a more aggressive way. So I also had kind of a not so good summer where I was going through depressive episodes, and my mom insisted that I go see a therapist because I wasn't talking to them. And after the therapy session in the car, she kind of kept bugging me like, oh, what did you guys talk about? And I kind of just blurted out, we talked about the fact that I don't need my father's acceptance for who I am. And then she was like, what is it that you need acceptance for? Like, what is it that you're afraid your dad won't accept? And then the next thing I said was, Mom, I'm never getting married. I'm never going to have kids. My body doesn't react to women the way other boys react to women. And she started asking the same things, like, are you sick? Is there something we can check? Like, is this whatever? And then she kind of pivoted where she was like, in our village, there was a bunch of men who exhibited similar traits where they said the same thing, but now they're all married and they all have kids. This is just a phase. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't label yourself. This is unfair. You're being selfish. Like, a lot of things were said. And I know it was because she was scared, because she did not see it coming. One of the things she said actually was, you expect me to believe that you were able to hide this from me your whole life? And what I told her was, I have a shopping list of all the comments that every single person has made regarding femininity, regarding how queer I looked, regarding anything like that as a kid growing up that bothered me to my core. And I didn't even know why. Why did I care that the kid down the street called me gay? Why did I care that my dad said, don't wear that because it makes you look like a girl? Why did I, all these things that built inside of me, because deep down I knew the truth and I was scared of people figuring it out. So I was explaining all this to her, and I could see she went into a state of shock. And the way that my mom dealt with it was not by asking questions. So initially she wanted to not talk about it. So we didn't talk about it for a whole week. After that day, nothing was mentioned. And then she wanted me to go see a psychiatrist of her choosing. So we did go to the psychiatrist, and this was in Amman, in Jordan. And immediately as we walked into the office, there was Quran everywhere, and I could tell kind of the vibe of where this was going. So, but I wanted to show my mom that I am not just being a teenager and like putting my foot down. I actually want to prove to her that this is really who I am. So I was willing to go with it. So when I walked into his office, he asked a lot of strange questions. Like, I'm a doctor, so I'm able to see now that everything he was asking me is not standard protocol. He asked me things like, when you masturbate, do you think of one man in particular or men in general? Do you fixate on men? Do you think you're a woman? He asked such inappropriate questions. But one thing that I appreciated from that visit was he acknowledged that being gay is something that I can't change. He did say things like, at least thank God that it doesn't show. Thank God that you haven't acted on it, which at the time I did, but I told him I didn't. But he was saying things like, this is a test from God, that at least you're putting all your energy into your studies. At least you're trying to make your parents proud. That's good enough. But the one thing I got out of it was that he was able to tell my mom that this was a permanent thing and that I wasn't getting married. She shed a tear. And then ever since that day, we haven't talked about it. But I know that she knows. And I know that one day, again, when I tell her, hey, Mom, do you want to come to my wedding? She can't be surprised because this was something that we talked about. And at the end of the day, again, I know, just like you, Muhammad, my mom loves me no matter what. And it's just hard for her to understand because she's so afraid of what it means. Not because she's ashamed or because she thinks I'm less of a man or less of a person. It's mostly just because she's afraid of the pain and suffering that I would go through. But what she doesn't understand is the only suffering I'm experiencing is rejection from my family. That's at the end of the day, all you care about is the love that you receive from your parents. And I think with time, and she knows, so this truth is implanted in her, so she can deny it all she wants, but it's there. At the end of the day, I feel like that's a small victory.
Wow. That's tough. And I'm sorry you went through that. I never went to a psychiatrist or anything like that. When I came up to my mom and my aunt, I was like fully confident, full of myself, so sure of my sexuality and everything that I wouldn't have. I mean, if I was younger, maybe they could have dragged me there. And I also came out over the phone, and they were back home, so they could deal with it on their own. And that is rough. I mean, what you went through, and like you're strong for dealing with it like that.
I mean, at the time, I wasn't strong. I would definitely say, looking back, that was probably the toughest period of my life. But because of it, I am now so confident in my sexuality and so confident in who I am because I was honest and I stood up for what I believed in. And I know that there are other people who aren't as lucky. You know, we hear stories all the time about kids who end up losing their parents. And to me, that scares me as well. But I know that's not going to be me. But it's still such a shame that at the end of the day, all parents want is for their kids to be happy. So it's so stunning to me that they see that if your child is gay, that means that they're not happy. But it's the complete opposite. You can live a completely fulfilled life if you just accept them, you know? Mm-hmm. But I guess they just don't know. They don't know that.
Ali, how old were you when this happened?
I was, I think, 20 or 19.
19. Okay.
Yeah, you know what? In a way, though, I'm not a parent, so I don't know what a parent's love for children feels like or what it means. But I kind of have a compassion for parents who reject their children, which is why I was prepared. Like, if my parents rejected me, that I would still love them. I would still understand where they're coming from, because the power of religion and tradition over them or anybody is very, very strong. It's very controlling. I mean, I hated myself. I rejected myself. Yeah. And I am the person who had those feelings, who was so sure of myself that I didn't choose to be gay. So for them, it's more of a foreign concept. You know, they have the secondhand experience of a son who has those gay feelings or whatever. And on the other hand, there's the teachings of tradition, of religion, of the hellfire that's in front of them and the hereafter. So if they are challenged in that way to the point of rejecting their kids, I kind of understand and I feel sorry for them. I'm not justifying it, but the power of the religious teachings is too strong.
Yeah.
But
the mind control, I feel like, is really strong. Like, it's so it's exactly like you said, you know, it's out of their hands. They just haven't been afforded the opportunity to think outside the box. And they try their best. You know, your mom and your aunt tried their best to understand. And that's a sign of love. That's a sign of them, you know, going against what they've been taught their whole life. Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying. And I see.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they showed me the utmost love. They listened. They showed me with compassion, like they heard me. And something that I realized after that is all my life I was afraid of them finding out that I'm gay. But even now, after they find out, being gay was just one part of who I am. Mm-hmm. Like, they still know Muhammad, the kid, the kind. I mean, I was a good student, so the good student, the naughty boy. It's just one side of me that they knew. But whereas for me, as a closeted gay man, my overarching identity was like being gay because I was so much focused on them. Mm-hmm. But for them, it was just one part of me. They just knew one thing more. So they wouldn't reject me based on one part, while they know my other traits and characters.
My mind is just on fire a little bit with both of your stories and the overlaps that I see between yours and my own story and with other stories I've heard, and also the differences. Both of you came to the States as relatively young adults, and I know I've had a journey around building community and connecting to community that I have cultural affinity with, not just in queer Muslim spaces, but also with people who are allies and from our part of the world. And so I'm curious what each of your journeys has been like around that, reconnecting both with queer community, queer Muslim community, Muslim or your respective Arab and Ethiopian community outside of queerness.
Yeah, an answer jumped out in my head when you said that. So I feel like coming to the States actually brought me closer to my Palestinian roots because, as I had mentioned earlier, growing up in Kuwait, I didn't really have the Palestinian representation around me. In fact, I grew up with, I love them to bits, but I grew up with snobby, rich Kuwaiti people. So I think growing up in that environment, I always felt less than, almost like a third-rate citizen, because my parents are there to work. They're not Kuwaiti. They're not fully accepted into this country. And they're basically refugees, it feels like. So it wasn't until coming to the States that I realized how important it was to embrace my Palestinian heritage, because it is a beautiful one. And it's one filled with so much loss and an injustice. And the sad part is, even as a kid, when we would visit Palestine, the few times that we did, I remember thinking on the way there, the bridge between Jordan to Palestine, I would see the Israeli soldiers mistreat the elderly Palestinian people, push around some of the people, call them names, tell them to hurry up. And I remember in the back of my mind thinking, wow, they're being mistreated so much. I must not be Palestinian then, because I don't deserve this mistreatment. So if they were, it almost felt like I disconnected from that part of me, because it felt like a lost cause. It felt like they were suffering so much, and I didn't want to add that to my list of things to worry about. It wasn't until coming to the States, where I'm surrounded by white Americans, where I realize the ignorance about the things that are happening back home. And it's not just ignorance because it's another part of the world. They should know about it because it's their country that has a huge hand in the suffering that's caused upon my people. So I think because of that, it got me into a lot of more research about the history of Palestine. I've participated in protests and the BDS movement and all these other things that I think have opened my eyes to both my culture and my heritage. I've started cooking a lot more Palestinian cuisine and missing home because of it. And all these things that I wish growing up I kind of embraced, even the music, the art, the culture. It's such a beautiful one. And I think I was especially realizing that there is a queer space in all that, because for the longest time, I don't know, Muhammad, how you feel about Ethiopian culture, but I associated any kind of Arabic identity to homophobia. But in reality, that's just one teeny tiny facet of the reality. It's just the loud minority. When I found out that there is a queer community for Palestinians, there's a lot of Instagram groups, there's chats online, there's all these things. There's artists and musicians and singers who are queer and Palestinian and open about it. It opened my eyes to the idea of pinkwashing, this idea that you can't be Palestinian and gay, that they make you choose, but that's not true. And it's something I feel like Western media created with their whole idea of pride and their whole idea of coming out and feeling like you had to relinquish all of your past, your culture, and fit into the normalized American society in order to fully be yourself. That's something I kind of realized I did not feel happy about, and it didn't bring me satisfaction. And I don't know how you feel, Muhammad, in terms of that.
My culture. Well, my relationship with my culture, right? I don't think I ever had any clash between my Ethiopianness and being my queerness. I realized that I was gay back home in Ethiopia. I think I was 19 or close to 20. And then when I came to the US, I was like 26. And I had my group of friends back home. I never questioned my identity and my sexuality, even though it's not accepted in the culture. It's criminalized by law. And my only struggle was the religion, because there was the hereafter, there was the sin and the punishment. But my Ethiopianness and my gayness were never opposing each other at all. But I know from other friends that I made in the US, for them to reconcile was a tough one. I had one friend, a lesbian Ethiopian, who grew up here, and I was the first queer Ethiopian that she ever met in person. And then when we met and I was talking to her in Amharic, our mother tongue, she was really shocked, and she would stare at me. She's like, a gay, an Ethiopian, and you're speaking the language. And then we went together to an Ethiopian restaurant. And then when we had a meal together, she cried. She said, she was so detaching herself from the culture, because when she is with her parents, she would be this little Ethiopian girl. And then when she goes out with her roommates and out for college, she would transform into this other queer person. And she never fused those two parts of her together. And she wouldn't even eat the food because she thought that she was bringing shame to the culture. Yeah. And that broke my heart, because I never went through that. But I realized that, oh, wow, we queer people have different struggles. Because I used to feel like going to the mosque that I was I was the filth. I was just the spot that I was praying at. I would just imagine it in my head like a dark spot that, oh, nobody else should come and pray in that spot because Muhammad was here and yeah, that was painful.
What was your journey like in terms of accepting that part of yourself in religion and coming to terms with that with God? Or if you have, I have no idea what your faith is now.
Yeah, well, it was a very long journey. Like I said, I was shocked that I was gay because I didn't expect a person like me would be a sinner, someone who tries to keep up with everything else, and suddenly finding out that I'm gay. That was a shocker for me. And then I tried to pray it away. My family, we used to go to Umrah, to Mecca, and then whenever we go there, I would pray about it and by the Kaaba. The first time I prayed, nothing happened. The next time we went, when I was praying there by the Kaaba, I looked up to the sky and then I wouldn't say that I heard the voice, but I had a feeling in me that my prayers are futile. Like, why am I there? Like something in me told me that, oh, you are who you are. You know it. Like, why are you just praying? You know, it's not going to change. So I just left and I prayed to God that, okay, I'll do everything right, but I can't change this thing. So just forgive me for this sin. That was my initial stance about it. And then gradually I would get conflicted because I wasn't given a choice. Like, I believe it's a sin. I can read the Quran. The Arabic is so clear to me. I rejected any other reinterpretation where people try to reinterpret the Quran and say that, oh, it accepts gays, it's just the action or the rape or the whatever, the inhospitality to guests, all those stories and about Qawm. I rejected all of those because I wanted to be true to myself. If the Quran rejects being gay, I don't want to be gay. But if I cannot change that I'm gay, at least, Ya Allah, forgive me for this, and I'll do everything right. But then the question will pop up every time because for something to be a sin, it has to be a choice. You know, I am given a choice to lie or not to lie, to steal or not to steal, to do all of those. But being gay, I wasn't given that choice. So that was like the fundamental question that shifted my views about many things about religion. And then that's when I started questioning, okay, maybe what we are taught is not true, or we understood it the wrong way. But I know for a fact that I wouldn't choose something that's against God's will. So God has created me this way. And then I started reconciling it. But the other parts of the faith, it just couldn't add up because I knew my truth. But the other things were some things that I learned from other scholars. And then as you question things, you know, I used to question other things as well. But this also just hyped my questioning. And I could see so many, what they call it, like fissures in the teachings. And that gradually shifted how I view Islam and how I view faith. And I came to a point where I have my own convictions now.
Did you ever reach a point, and I'm projecting because I felt this way, did you ever reach a point where you were mad at God or you felt angry towards the religion that said that you're a sin?
I think so, yeah, several times. Mainly because I wasn't given a choice. Yeah, I should have, for me to be a sinner, and to accept that, I should have been given a choice. And without a choice, I felt trapped. You know, if it was something else, I would just reject the choice and do something else. But now, the fact that I wasn't given a choice and I've been called a sinner and I'm condemned to hellfire, I couldn't accept that. So I was either mad at God or the teachings, but mostly at the teachings or our misunderstanding, because I had a good relationship with God. I knew that He knows me better than me. So even when I prayed to God, I would say, Allah, you know me. You are the one who created me. So you know that I wouldn't choose something wrong. So there must be somewhere. I was trying to excuse Him. Somewhere something is wrong, but you know that I wouldn't choose something bad.
I really think, Muhammad, that religion is just mistreated by the people that abuse it. So I would like you guys both to maybe at separate times to check the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait on their Instagram post. I don't know if either of you have seen this, but they posted a Pride post where they just said America stands with the LGBTQ community. and it was the US Embassy Kuwait account. And Bahrain's account
Okay.
did the same thing.
Uh-huh.
The comments are so malicious, and I have never seen so much hatred before towards the queer community by Arabs in one forum. And it just made me feel, wow, Islam never, ever said to hate something this much, that you would insult not just their identity, but their form. You insult their intelligence, you insult their mental capacity. They said things like, in our religion, we're supposed to burn those people alive. And I couldn't help but think, what if a young queer Arab person was scrolling through those comments and did not come to terms with who he was? And that was the stick that broke the camel's back, and maybe they took their life. Is that what Islam wants? So I couldn't help but feel like it's not the religion that's at fault. It's the people that choose to abuse it. And it really is an abuse, because Islam always just preaches love, at least in the way that I interpret it. And the way that it's used in our society is more like a gatekeeping mechanism of making yourself feel better than others by saying, oh, well, at least I pray 5 times a day. Oh, at least I fast. Oh, well, look at her. She doesn't wear her hijab the right way. All these things just seek to exclude people and marginalize people. That's not a human right. Some of the things they were saying was, it's my right to have my faith and believe that gay people are not supposed to exist. And in my head, I'm like, no, that's not what Islam says. Islam says you have your belief. You're allowed to have others have their own belief. And it's just the mistreatment of the religion that I think is the issue.
Well, I have a slightly differing view than what you presented.
I would love to hear.
I mean, yeah, I hope it's not that controversial, but those attitudes that those people projected in that forum, I haven't seen that post, but I can imagine what they were saying, because similar posts by foreign embassies back home in Ethiopia has happened, and both Muslims and Christians, they jumped on that comment section and they were spewing all the hate for the embassies and for the gays back home, and they will hang them, will burn them, all of that. I don't think this is coming from an empty space. And I don't want to absolve the religion of any of that, because these people were taught those things by the religion. I know the hadiths that say that if you find a person, two males doing the thing, it doesn't mention it by name, but throw them from the highest building in the town, or the burn them alive, or the killing. All of that is taught in the religion. These people didn't bring it from anywhere. Yes, there are certain rules in Islam that we tend to ignore. For example, somebody is drinking. There are many Muslims who drink. They don't get ostracized by the society. Even adultery, even though it's like one of the biggest sins, it's kind of taboo, but it's a hush-hush and it's accepted. But when it comes to gays, all that hatred, all that attitude comes from the religion. The religion teaches that, yes, there is one side of it that's all about love and compassion and being hospitable and treating each other with kindness and all of that. But also when it comes to sinning and other vices in society, the religion takes a very strong stance. And that's where these people are coming from. So that's my view on it.
I think about queerness and fundamentalist religion just across the board, and how often queer people have a terrible time. Hearing you all talk about the interpretation of religion, it made me think about how there are many strictures that they say you shouldn't do this, and people do it all the time. And for some reason, gayness is the one that gets fixated on, and that gets lifted up as like the worst sin possible. Yeah. And there's something about that makes me a little bit skeptical, that I find to be somewhere in the middle of what you're both saying. So Muhammad, to a degree, yes, there is stuff in the religion, and Ali, it's getting interpreted in a particular way that feels very cultural and, as you say, suspicious to me.
Yeah, so I can give an example of something else other than queerness that I've seen stand out to me in terms of the way of interpretation and culture and how they've intertwined. So I feel like the thing that kind of links very strongly to the reason why gay people are ostracized most is this idea of reputation. and like the idea of what it means to be gay. It means if you're a man, you're a little feminine, which in the eyes of the Arabic culture is seen as less than, because masculinity has been made to be this thing of like, oh, you're macho, you're manly, you have a beard, and it's the way that the culture framed it. So it kind of utilizes the religion in the text that it says and kind of highlighting, see, you're not supposed to be feminine. You're not supposed to show emotions. You're not supposed to care about the way you look or whatever. So in a similar sense, I can, for example, give you this short story. My dad one time came up to my mom and told her, and he tells her this all the time. He's like, why don't you wear the hijab? Like, why don't you decide, oh, why not? Like, all your other friends do it. What's the big deal? And she countered. And my mom, I would say, is religious, but I won't say that. I would say she's culturally religious, but not so much religious in the sense that she prays 5 times a day. But she responded by saying, if you really cared about my faith and you cared about my soul, you would tell me to pray 5 times a day. You wouldn't tell me to wear a scarf. So that shows that in so many people's eyes, they see religion as a sign of reputation, that it's what you show people. It's what you show people that you're fasting. You show people that you're praying 5 times a day. It's not really in the name of God, which is the whole reason you're supposed to be doing all these things for God. You're not supposed to be doing it for the material world or for the people to see. So I feel like for that same reason, being gay is such a visible thing to some people that they see it as this outward revolting against the religion and the culture, more importantly, because the culture has advocated for so long that men are men, whatever that means, and women are the ones that clean the house, take care of the kids, and just look pretty.
I mean, men are men because they're not women.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because God forbid.
Yeah.
Anything but that.
Exactly. So that's where I think all the mistreatment of religion comes from. It comes from this deep-rooted misogyny and like this idea. It's the same reason why drinking is seen as cool, because at the end of the day, it showcases this masculine side of you that's like, oh, I party, that's seen as cool somehow, but being gay does not. And that's just the way it was framed, I think, in the Middle East. Whereas now in the US, you are seeing this kind of change where now, especially with the whole corporate like pride celebration where it's kind of being normalized, I kind of don't care, because a part of me is like, you know what, at least we're popular here. At least now it's accepted. At least it's put into the idea that being gay generates money. And I think that kind of propels the idea that being gay is good for your reputation, So it's this whole notion of what people perceive more than what the religion is actually saying.
Mm. So if I may jump in, I see it differently, but similar to what you said, Ali. The being gay is mostly, it's an unknown. It's not something visible that people see, like drinking or any other sins. It's done behind closed doors. There is an element of fear in people of something that they don't understand. That's one thing. They don't understand it. They don't know the feelings. It's not written on our foreheads. It's just a feeling that you have, and it's a feeling that questions the masculinity of people, because if you listen to like popular jokes and everything like that, people are afraid of other men having sex with them, being topped. That's the gist of their jokes and their fear.
That's misogyny as well.
It is. They're afraid of losing their masculinity if another man looks at them a certain way. The other part of it is fear of something that they don't understand. And when you come from the religious perspective, there is the story of Lot and the Sodom and Gomorrah, which is mentioned in Christianity and Islam and Judaism, that how that city was destroyed. So people are afraid of that sin might destroy us again. There is that element. Then also it's very convenient to gang up on gay people because it's a small minority. Like if all men ganged up on women, that's half society. I mean, it's not a war you can win. But there's an element of disgust which stirs out emotions, On one hand, you have the disgust of the gay sex. Funny enough, they don't talk about women, but I guess that's part of the misogyny too. And then there's the fear of punishment from God. And then there is the convenience of ganging up on a small minority, even though it's a spectrum and some people may have feelings here and there. But the fully raging homosexuals like you and I, Ali, were very few. So it's easier for them to gang up against us. For example, in Ethiopia, speaking of fundamentalism and religion, it's mostly a peaceful country when it comes to religious relationships. It's only divided on ethnic lines. But sometimes there are some religious divisions that happen. But the one thing that unites them is the homosexuality issue. All of them. And the people who stir this up, actually, like Ethiopia is mainly Orthodox and Muslim, and there is a sizable minority of evangelicals. The evangelicals are the ones who translate or import the homophobia that's happening in the US. They're also funded by their NGOs, and they're the ones bringing up the topic back home. And they're rallying the Muslims and the Orthodox Christians around this issue. And somehow you find that, okay, they're united because it's an easy issue to bring people around.
In my experience, the way that homophobia is expressed, it's tinged not just by religion, but also by culture. The kinds of things that people hear about it, or the way that parents might react or not react. There's some cultural logic underpinning it, as well as the expression of the religious condemnation. And these are sticky questions. What is religion? What is culture? And then why is everybody so intent on picking on queer people, especially given that it's not a choice?
Yeah.
What is it that you might want the people who grew up around you to know about queerness, about the journey, about what it means to be homophobic? What is it that you would have wanted them to know?
That's a deep question.
That is very deep. So I don't want to be insensitive to my parents because I feel like I bash them enough. I love my parents, but for the life of me, I do not want their life. I don't want a life filled with non-ending hustling and kind of working towards the next goal. Okay, what am I supposed to do to have a successful life? 1, get a job. 2, get married. 3, have kids, provide for kids, continue working for the rest of your life, retire, do nothing, die. That's not the life I want for myself. And I think if I'm able to deliver that in a not harsh way, kind of pointing the mirror back at them and saying, ask yourself, are you happy in your old age right now? Are you happy with your life choices? Are you happy with the career moves you've made? Are you happy that you've given your entire soul into this family without a second's hesitation about what you want? Because I know for a fact at the end of the day, the choices that my parents made were not their own, nor were they in their own benefit. And my dad, for example, whom I love very much, and he has done everything for us, has now retired. And sometimes I think to myself, has he lived his entire life for others? Has he done everything to just prove a point to his community and his family that he is worth existing? But in doing so, he just never thought to ask himself what makes me happy. So it's such a simple question of just saying, I'm just doing what makes me happy. I'm just living my life. And I know that down the line, I'm not going to regret my choices, because if I just live my life following the blueprint that society laid out for me, I'm going to one day look back and think, wow, I just wasted so many years of my life doing nothing. All my youth. Like you, Muhammad, were saying, it took you 15 years to tell your mom. Those 15 years feels like, not that it's wasted, but it feels like you've spent so much of your life just afraid instead of just seizing the moment and just being alive and being happy that you're here today. Because at the end of the day, life, as cheesy as it is, life is beautiful, and it's meant to be enjoyed. And yeah, I just don't want to wake up one day regretting all my choices.
Beautiful. Yeah, something that I want other people to know is that being queer, being gay, it's just a human experience. We found ourselves this way one day. Nobody chooses to be ostracized or hated or being kicked out or disowned or any of those troubles. Some people think that we choose to be gay just because for fun or because we want to be different. We want to try something out.
Why would we do anything that will make our lives so much harder?
Yeah, if they could just simply ask that small question instead of, being neutral and just shed away or close all what you have been taught in religion, in culture, in anything, and say, okay, this human being in front of me, why would they choose something like this? Like, what's the benefit of it? It's so simple. Like, if they really understood the struggle, like right now we're all, like three of us, talking confidently and sharing about our lives and laughing and things like that. But behind that, there is many years of pain that we went through to get to this point. And we don't deserve that. Nobody deserves that. And then if they really question themselves and answer that question, maybe they would hate us less. Maybe they would try to understand, like, why these people are like that. The problem is, and that's something that I realized, interestingly, talking to my dad about queer issues at some point, like a couple of years ago, that he never thought about those issues. He just heard what the religion taught, and then he heard some YouTube videos about homosexuality and how the West is exporting this filth to corrupt the Eastern cultures and things like that. And he didn't process it. He's disgusted. He's afraid. He took it and he went away with that thought. He never stopped to process. And when I questioned him on several things, that's when I realized, he never had to think of those things. They're just hating out of the blue, out of nothing. So that's one thing that I would ask them. Just stop and ask, like, why would people choose to be this? Even if you think it's a choice. It's not like I'm getting any benefit out of it. I'm just being me. And then once they realize that, they can move on to the next step and think as an individual, okay, this is a human person. They're having this journey in life. I'm having a different journey. That's okay. So long as there is no harm. It's not that I'm evil and I'm like trying to corrupt them or change them or kill them or murder them. I'm just living my life.
So the thing you were saying, Hamid, about why would anyone choose this? I think that's one of the beautiful things about queerness. And we were talking earlier about what the gift of being queer was. In one of the first episodes I did of this podcast, I talked to somebody, originally Indian. And we talked about how being queer made it so that, as you said, Ali, you don't automatically just default to what society expects of you. So I'm going to ask you both, what would you say to your young selves now, if you could say something?
I would tell myself that your future is so bright, as I had mentioned before, it kind of seemed at some points that I just didn't have a future. And every step of the way felt impossible. Like, it would be impossible to have a boyfriend. It would be impossible to be out. It would be impossible to have a conversation like this, where I'm confident in being able to just discuss homosexuality. And I think that, again, another cliche sentiment, but things do get better with time. And there's more to life than just your adolescence, just take it day by day and eventually things get better.
So for me, there might be many things that I could tell my younger self at different stages in my life. One thing that just popped up in my mind is that things are not static, like things change. Whatever, in my darkest moments, what I thought that was a permanent thing, I would have loved to tell myself at that moment that this will change. This will not be forever. It may get better, it may get worse, but that painful moment is not there forever. That would have helped. I think I regret that I have doubted the love of my family towards me. Like, so far, I've had wonderful coming out stories to my cousins, to my siblings, to my mom, to my aunt. I never had any negative reaction from anybody, even from my friends. So I consider myself lucky in that sense. But I wish I saw that when I was on the other
Mhm.
side in the beginning of my journey. That would have given me some hope
Yeah.
when I needed it.
Yeah. Yeah. I would have also told myself that I shouldn't. When you mentioned coming out stories, I remember feeling so grateful to the first few people I came out to when their reaction was good. And now looking back, I'm like, wow, I was just grateful that they didn't think I was unworthy of existing, which is so sad, thinking how little I thought of myself back then. And I wish I could tell myself, you're great. You have so much potential, and life, every life is valuable and important, and you shouldn't see yourself less than. And it's a privilege for people to know who you truly are, and you don't have to come out to people. You don't have to explain yourself to anyone. And yeah, it's taken a lot of time and effort for me to realize that, what's that saying? Acceptance is not a gift, it's a right. I have a right to be accepted. So yeah, that's definitely something I would remind myself.
You know what, Ali? That reminded me of another thing. Like every time I came out to my siblings or cousins and friends, I was amazed of how much they loved me.
Mhm.
The love that they showed to me. And I wish I loved myself the way they loved me.
Yes.
Because at that time, I hated myself.
Yes.
And I hated myself not because I was a bad person or anything, because I was taught that I was a bad person. I was taught that I was a sinner. I was this dirty thing that couldn't stand to pray in front of God because I was so ashamed of that person. And mind you, at that point, I didn't even kiss a guy.
Yeah.
Okay. It was just the realization that I was gay that had me put myself so down that I hated it. And every time, like when I come out, I am so surprised of how much love people are showing me. And I wish I loved myself back then. I wouldn't have wasted so much of my life and my thoughts, sleepless nights on something that's really worthless at the end of the day. But yeah, that was my journey, and somehow it worked, and I'm one of the lucky ones who survived and made it this far. Because to be honest, there were moments that maybe I wouldn't have made it this far. So yeah, I and that's what I want to tell myself and maybe other kids, that there are people out there who love you, no matter what the religion taught you or the culture or whatever. In your darkest hours, not everything is dark. I wish I was told that. Yeah.
So that fear, just want to say, it does come from somewhere for a lot of young kids, right? My very first coming out experience was not a good one. And that was the only one that was not good. It's really interesting. I was 19 and it was my roommate for the summer. And she flipped and she disappeared for several days.
Wow.
And a year later she apologized, but that was interesting. And I remember I had this moment when I was trying to communicate with her because I was about to leave that city, that I just realized, I was like, oh, that's it. This relationship is over. And luckily I haven't had any experiences like that since.
Yeah, the first one is a tough one. I'm sorry.
I can't imagine. Yeah, I can't imagine how that must have formed. That must have formed your future. Yeah. How you saw yourself, because that's the reaction of the first person who knew you were gay.
It's traumatizing.
Yeah, so it did and it didn't. So let me make a slight correction. It wasn't the first person who knew I was gay. It was the first person who I told, like, oh my God, guess what I did last night? It was awesome.
Yeah.
And she did not think it was awesome.
Yeah.
So I'd had better reactions to like my being, as opposed to, something I was very happy about and she didn't seem to be. I want to end by asking each of you, what is your favorite coming out story? Coming out to somebody who you care about?
For me, it's definitely my best friend, which was also my first coming out, because I remember sitting on my couch in my apartment, invited her over, and I had been practicing the words in my head, but it wasn't until I said out loud, I'm gay, that it just shattered my world. And I physically collapsed because I just felt the weight of 20 years of emotions build up that I had not faced, and it all suddenly poured in. And here it was, me saying these words out loud to someone who existed, and I could never take those words back again. Because I could say them to myself all I want, but it wasn't until somebody else knew the truth that it became real. So that was definitely a moment I will never forget because of how scared and excited I was at the same time.
Mm.
Yeah, for me, the first time I came out to a family member was my cousin, but since we grew up together, she's like my sister. That was a monumental time in my life where I felt that I reconnected with my family. I got the assurance that I wanted, that it's okay that I am this way. And the words that she said, that it's okay, nothing is not going to change. And if you are gay, then we must have been taught something wrong. Like our understanding is wrong. Like I believe you. I never believed in myself that way, the way my cousin believed in me. So that was my best moment. And years later, like this, and I was scared, I was trembling, and I was crying, hugging her and everything. And she's much younger than me, but the fact that I could confide that in her, that was a big moment for me. And then years later, when I came out to another cousin, I came out in a very sarcastic way. I just let it slide and then mentioned that I was gay in a very easy way. And he was confused, like, okay, are you joking? Are you being sarcastic? Like, tell me, like, be serious. And I was like, no, I'm gay, blah, blah, blah. And I was happy at that moment too, contrasting it to my first coming out, how easy it is that I can casually mention that I'm gay and just go on my day. So those two stand out for me.
Wow, yeah.
And my older brother, who, Muhammad, you know, I don't know, Ali, if you know, my older brother passed away about a year ago.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. He's my half-brother and 7 years older than me. And as it happens, he was gay.
Oh.
And I was 19 years old and finally putting together a few things about myself. And as I was putting them together about myself, I was like, wait a second. I started putting them together about him. And I remember we met up one day and we were hanging out with my father. And I noticed that he got a little like, you know, let himself be a little more effeminate when my dad wasn't around. I think he was trying to signal to me. And finally I said, John, I was like, John, are you straight? He said, no. Like, are you bi? He said, no. He's like, I'm gay. I was going to tell you. And I was like, dude, guess what? And he's like, no. I was like, what? He's like, I already know. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I've known since you were this big. It's very obvious. I was like, oh. So.
I love the question, are you straight? That's a good way.
Boys, thank you so much for coming on here and talking to me. I've been excited to have this conversation, and this was really amazing. This is going to stay with me, and my mind has been spinning still at some of the stories that you both shared.
Likewise, and thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed it. The conversation just flew. This was great.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. If you found this enlightening, please spread the word. Share the podcast or leave us a rating or review. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.